So how sort of influenced were you when genres like grunge and Britpop began to come in? Did it sort of reach you
The
where you
grunge,
were?
the grunge, definitely. Yeah, I actually went to America on a holiday in 91, somewhere about 91, 92 or so, and of course it was big then because it was coming out of America, wasn't it? Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots on the radio all the time. Loved it. Very influential. Britpop, yeah, not necessarily my cup of tea, but I could see the appeal. It sold millions. It was very, very popular. How much that influenced me personally, probably turned me on to even have sort of heavier music. I liked because through the 80s we got used to the really polished techno pop, crystal clear sound, and then when we went back to the sort of slightly dirtier analog side of things, that was, in my opinion, that was great, because back to the 70s, late 60s when I grew up with that kind of sound. What's his face? Drummer, Foo Fighters.
Dave Grohl.
Dave Grohl. He's carried that on, hasn't he? He's brought that. Everything he does is analog. He's brought that ancient new desk and sound city, hasn't he? So yeah.
Do you think you'd still listen to the same kind of music today if you hadn't gone through the 90s, or has it?
I would still listen. Well, gosh, that's tricky. I would still listen to the stuff I grew up with, and I still listen to quite a bit of that grunge stuff and anything similar these days. Rock has got a bit corporate again in the 90s and the 2000s, but recently it seems to have got a bit sort of almost grungier again, with bands like I'm trying to think of Mastodon and Carnival and bands like that. It's got a bit dirtier again. It's a terrible word, but there we go.
But when I've been researching Britpop in the 90s, I've noticed it's all very sort of regional. Every kind of place had their own scene. And did you find that it was quite like that?
I guess it kind of was, wasn't it? Because there was this big thing of, was it Blur versus Oasis? Manchester versus London.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was a bit of that, certainly. Yeah. I wasn't a teenager then, so maybe some of that passed me by a little, but yeah, you could see there was some sort of rivalry. Oasis were a bit later, weren't they? But they seemed to just hate everybody, which was kind of cool.
Obviously, there was a big drug culture in the 90s, which had a great impact on the music. Did you ever think that the whole music scene kind of became more about the drugs and the hype rather than the actual?
It did seem to, didn't it? Yeah, especially when you and again, it's happened lots of times. When you see bands getting on news at 10 for the drugs rather than for the music, yeah, you know that something is going slightly wrong. Although that did happen before. But yeah, you're right. There was a fashion. The difference possibly 80s, 90s was the accessibility to the music. Now you guys are spoiled because you got access to music through any number of channels, the internet being the main one. So you can access anything. When I was growing up, 70s, and then in the 80s and the 90s, well, all right, we may have had MTV if we were rich enough, or our parents were rich enough, but we had very limited access to new music. So I think that when something did fire up the imagination, everybody followed it because it was on all the time. These days you can tread your own path because there's so much more access to it. And that's not a fully formed theory, but I've only just thought that's probably true.
Do you think that the standard of music's improved or declined since the
Oh gosh, I think that's a loaded question. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you do have your loves from when you first discovered music, and I've still got those. And those you always hold up as a sort of a gold standard, and is it better or worse than that? So I think that with my old fart head on, I'd say yes, but there's still a lot of good music around. I think in some ways the democratisation of music does dilute it slightly, but people still choose what they want to choose, don't they? And I can't. We shouldn't judge them, should we? If they choose something I disagree with. But I think that's not really answering the question. I think there's a lot of valid music around.
Are there any artists, genres, bands that you think didn't really need to happen, didn't further music at all, didn't really fit it?
Well, I don't know about genres, because there's always something good that comes out of some genres, and you can never tell. Sometimes some things come out of them that maybe you can't see the links. There's a lot of, I'd probably better not mention bands by name, but there was a lot of stuff in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s that probably didn't need to happen. And I think it was probably then that, like I was talking about earlier, that they did start cynically marketing stuff at 12-year-old kids, with the spending power to buy it. That's perhaps when things were invented that a bit too far, perhaps. I was probably thinking of the Spice Girls, but a lot of people love the Spice Girls, so what can I say?
Finally, just in one sentence or something, could you sum up your experience of the 90s musically?
Well, you started with it, so I'll finish with it. It was grunge. I loved it. I bought all those albums, still got them all, and so I've discovered it. Maybe I took ownership of it because I discovered it slightly before UK, because I was in America briefly, only for a holiday, only for a few weeks, but I picked it all up then. I loved it all. So I think that's, it's that return, it was 20, however many years ago now. It was that return to that the name sums it up, that grungier, analog, dirtier sound. I've used that word again, sorry.
That's great,